Welcome back to the Adam Schefter podcast as we are fresh off the NFL trade deadline, and Ty Schmit, my co-host here, the host of the Pat McAfee Show. This feels a lot what it felt like when you would finish finals in college, Christmas time, and know that you had a little downtime before classes started again in the beginning of January. That's what it feels like again. We're going to look at all these topics today, and we're going to have you, Ty Schmit, of course, lead us on our weekly six-pack.
Thank you very much, Schefter. Yeah, wild day, obviously. I think, we're going to
Holy cow.
Yeah, wild.
Can I take a breath right now?
Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
Oh, my God. That was wild.
Schefter came on Pat's show today. The idea was, hey, anytime we get some breaking news or we hear something about, the trade deadline, Schefter would come on and kind of walk us through it. It ended up being, 2-minute spurts where really you were just getting hammered with phone calls and text messages.
Oh my
God. Volume was so high. I mean, where does this, right off the top, where does this rank in the last couple years of, a crazy trade deadline day?
Ty, I would venture to tell you that there's never been an NFL trade deadline day with this much draft compensation that traded hands. We usually get some moves. There usually have been some moves, but this was a day I think that was unprecedented on the NFL trade deadline day. We saw how many first-round draft picks traded today? 3. Mm-hmm. How many second-round draft picks traded today? 1. How many players traded today? There was so much movement, so much activity. Didn't expect that. So I think it was unlike any other trade deadline day in modern history. Look, there's been an uptick in activity, a surge in moves that have been made in recent years. I think that this sport has seen other sports be very active at the trade deadline. It's seen NFL teams succeed at the trade deadline making moves, and the teams that didn't make moves now are making moves, and now we're getting moves that you weren't even expecting, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, there was so much of that today, and with that being said, let's get right into it, Schefty. Let's get into who the biggest players of the day were. Let's start with, team number one, I guess, of this trade deadline six-pack, the Cowboys. Wow, did they go to work today? What do you know about what the Cowboys' plans were and what they ultimately did bolstering that defense?
Well, Ty, if we go back to what Jerry Jones said when he traded away Micah Parsons, that night, he wasted no time in saying, we're not done yet. We're going to use some of this to go out and get other players. There was a lot of interest in Quinnen Williams across the league. It became apparent to me over the last 24 or so hours that Quinnen Williams was going to be a guy that was moved. And Dallas had the capital to go get it done. In fact, I said to another general manager today, shortly after the Cowboys traded a second-round pick in 26, a first-round pick in 27, and the former first-round draft pick Mozzie Smith to the Jets in return for the 3-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle Quinnen Williams. I said, that's a lot to give up. And the GM said, not really. Not for a player that good. And that's how I think a lot of people felt for a player who's in the prime of his career, Quinnen Williams, a player who will help come in and help the Dallas Cowboys now. The only problem is I feel like the Cowboys are 3-5-1. They're behind the 8 ball. I don't know that they're going to be able to play well enough to make the playoffs this season. And so I don't know what kind of impact Quinnen Williams and Logan Wilson, the former Bengals linebacker who also was traded to Dallas on Tuesday, will be able to make this season. They'll make an impact. But I don't know if it'll be enough to elevate that team to a playoff spot in an NFC conference that is so deep and so talented. We'll see. But Dallas has set up its defense for future seasons because it got a great player in Quinnen Williams. And I think Logan Wilson was somebody that has been effective when he's been used too. So Jerry Jones stepped up. And in his parlance, Ty, he hit a gusher today. He hit a gusher. He got Quinnen Williams, the 3-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle. He did what he said he would.
Yeah, and you said on Pat's show, Schefty, that they had been kind of in talks for a while. I don't know. This is one of those names where I really didn't see. I mean, anyone who was following the Jets and what they might do at the trade deadline, it seemed like Quinnen Williams getting moved was a long shot because he is unbelievable. And obviously, this helps out their defense quite a bit, him and Logan Wilson. They needed to do something. But it also, it does just kind of come in a weird spot coming off the Monday night loss where, just a bad loss. Offense didn't look good. Obviously, the defense is what it is. But, I see a lot of Cowboys fans that are kind of, I don't want to say confused, but it's just a weird feeling because obviously you're doing something that everyone acknowledges you probably needed to do, but it comes on the heels of arguably the worst loss of the season.
Wouldn't it have been great to have made this move 3 weeks ago when the Cincinnati Bengals traded for Joe Flacco? Wouldn't it have been great to make the move then, to have Quinnen Williams on a night where the Cardinals debuted their first-round pick, Walter Nolan, who made such an impact against the Cowboys? Wouldn't it have been great to have had these guys earlier? They waited till the end. They're 3-5-1. They're on their bye. They'll make their debut Monday night against the Raiders a week from Monday night. So we'll see. You just hope that they can help elevate the Cowboys in the back half of the season.
Yeah, and they got to make up some ground quick. Booger McFarland actually said that he thinks now the Cowboys have the best D-tackle tandem in the NFL. So we'll see. We'll see if that's enough to kind of get them back into the playoff picture. But obviously, that was a massive move, no doubt. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the second team of the trade deadline six-pack, the Colts. I will just say this happened obviously live during Pat's show today, and it shocked everybody. We could not believe this. Sauce Gardner gets traded to the Colts for 2 first-round picks and A.D. Mitchell. What can you tell us about that whole situation? How did that come to be?
Well, first of all, reached out to a couple of people in the Colts, and one of them texted me back this morning. I'm like, hey, because the Colts have been rumored to be making a move, like get a defensive player. I don't think that really was a big surprise. I think the surprise was the player that they got. Nobody forecasted Sauce Gardner. Think about this. How much noise, speculation, discussion has there been about the players who could be available at the trade deadline in the last month?
A lot.
Did you hear once the name Sauce Gardner?
No,
Okay.
Not even broached in like a joking way by someone saying like, oh, could you imagine if, none of that.
None of it. And so this morning, one of the people that I was texting with in Indianapolis, I said, hey, big move coming today. And I got back a thing, doubt it, with a Irish clover, like keep your fingers crossed. I was like, okay, well, clearly they're trying to get something done. Now, I was not expecting Sauce Gardner to be the one. And then this afternoon, Sauce Gardner posts on Twitter, it's been real, New York, with a green heart. And everyone's like, what's that? Here's a guy that signed a 4-year, $120+ million contract in July. Like, you're not trading a guy that you just signed to a 4-year, $120 million contract. Even his agents had no idea that this was coming today. Nobody did. And the Colts identified him as a player that they loved coming out of Cincinnati. Lou Anarumo, their defensive coordinator, coached in Cincinnati when Sauce Gardner was a standout in that city, is quite familiar with him. And also think about who was the last defensive coordinator to shut down Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. The Colts defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, when he was with the Bengals, and the Bengals advanced to the Super Bowl. Now you give Lou Anarumo an added weapon that will help your coverage, but also help you with your pass rush. So in a way, he helps a lot of elements to your defense, Sauce Gardner does. And the Colts remind me this year of the Commanders last year. Nobody thought the Commanders were going to be the team they were last year. They wound up going to the NFC Championship game, and right before the trade deadline last year, as the Commanders were exceeding expectations, performing better than anyone thought, their general manager, Adam Peters, traded for Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints. Now, Lattimore, I don't know, that made a big impact, and he tore his ACL this week, and he's on IR, and he's out for the year, and that did not work out as well as the Commanders would have liked. But the thought process and the comparisons are similar because the Colts are better than people thought. They're exceeding expectations. They're in the playoff race. They may win their division. They could represent the AFC in the Super Bowl, and they figured, let's take this opportunity in the season. We're honoring our late owner, Jim Irsay, and let's devote 2 future first-round draft picks and a former second-round pick in A.D. Mitchell to go make this trade to get our defense better, to give us the best possible chance to go to the Super Bowl and win it this year.
Yeah, and if you're a Colts fan, you have to absolutely love this. I think, like you mentioned, everyone kind of knew they were going to do something. They probably weren't going to stand pat, but this move signals to the fans, to the locker room, hey, we're all in. We're going for it this year. I think it was maybe you who tweeted, Shefty. Obviously, you tweet or you trade 2 first-round picks. That signals, hey, we don't think we're not in the quarterback market. So, does that allude to the fact, hey, they think they have their guy in Dan Jones? Maybe he's going to get an extension at some point this year. Obviously, Sauce has a pretty sizable contract that's coming with him, but, with the salary cap going up and everything, I mean, in a couple years, if they believe that he is a top 5 cornerback in the NFL. Obviously, that's a position of need that they've had. They've been banged up there. So yeah, I haven't looked at it too much around Twitter and everything, but I would imagine that the city is buzzing right now because you could argue that the Colts stole the trade deadline with this move.
Well, the Colts stole the trade deadline, except for the topic that we're about to go into. They are the ones that stole the trade deadline.
Yeah, well said, Schefty. And if you're a Jets fan, you don't want to hear this, but let's move on to the third team who ended up being massive sellers. Walk us through what the mindset was with the Jets today, Schefty.
Well, it's incredible. To me, the Jets were the story of the deadline, and the Dallas Cowboys made a huge move for Quinnen Williams from the Jets, and the Colts made a huge move for Sauce Gardner from the Jets, but the Jets were the team that traded away 2 former All-Pro players on trade deadline day. Again, we've never seen anything like that, and loaded up with draft picks in 2026 and 2027. And so what this does is it sends a message to the rest of the NFL that the New York Jets are on the prowl for a quarterback. They are all in on the quarterback market in 26 or 27 or both or whatever it takes to go get the franchise quarterback that they have not been able to get in a city where the Giants have stumbled into Jackson Dart and have identified him. The Jets need their franchise quarterback of the future, and they have built up enough ammunition that every team with double ones in future years, the Cleveland Browns have 2 ones in 26. The Los Angeles Rams have 2 ones in 26. The Miami Dolphins have added ammunition after trading away Jalen Phillips. These teams are like, ooh, the New York Jets are going for a quarterback. That's what they said today. There's nothing more important. And they're 1-7. So as great as Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner are, and one team told me that they had an extraordinarily high grade on Sauce Gardner. He was the highest rated cornerback according to their metrics, that he allowed only a 17% completion rate against them all year long, and Quinnen Williams is stout in the center of the Jets defense. They're 1-7 this year still, Ty. So they're playing with Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner, and they're 1-7. Now, again, the difficult part is you're taking apart your defense. And that's not ideal. But you know what? They have a new general manager in Darren Muji. They have a new head coach in Aaron Glenn. And they're starting over, and these guys are going to have the ability now to bring in their guys and remake the roster. Now, we've seen a lot of this with the Jets before. They started over with Mark Sanchez. They started over with Sam Darnold. They started over with Zach Wilson. They're going to start it over again with another quarterback. But you want to hope and think that this time maybe it'll work, and the draft class of 27 is supposed to be outstanding in the terms of quarterbacks. So if the Jets don't get one this year, and there's a lot of mixed opinions about the quarterback draft class in 26, then 27 is waiting. But the Jets have options, and they have the draft capital, and they are the team that stole trade deadline day in 2025.
Yeah, and if you're a fan, it's tough, obviously, because this is it's a full-on reset. It's, hey, we're hoping that within the next 5 years we'll be the team that can compete. And that's one of the, we were talking months ago about the 2026 quarterback draft class and how a lot of people thought that might have been the best one in 20-some years. And then now we're, 9-10 weeks through the college football season, and that has cooled off like you would not believe. So anytime you get into those situations where, you're a couple years out and this could be the most talented class ever, obviously that's a scary position for fans to be in. But, hopefully that Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji got assurances too, so that we don't have them. I would expect that would be the case.
Exactly.
Right,
I think that's a part of this. Now, the other interesting part is at one point when I was driving to Connecticut, and I'm on the phone with you guys popping into the Pat McAfee Show. At one point in time, I get a call. Hey, you got to watch Breece Hall being traded here. Hey, you got to watch Quincy Williams being traded here. Hey, you got to watch Jermaine Johnson being traded here. The Jets had discussions about all those players. And at one point, I'm like, they may trade away their whole roster here. What is going on? This is unbelievable. But it was just Sauce Gardner and it's just Quinnen Williams.
Was there any chatter about, because one of those names that did get brought up was Garrett Wilson, and I think we thought after we saw
I never heard his name.
Okay.
Never heard Garrett Wilson's name, and they've said that he's a part of their future. Never heard his name, and I heard a lot of Jets names over the course of the past couple of days.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. So if you're a Jets fan, obviously you're not too thrilled today, but hey, in 2 years, over the next 2 years, you're going to have a load of first-round draft picks. So they have an opportunity here. They do, and it's just one of those things. Hey, you can't screw it up. You got all these picks. You got to make sure those guys hit. And we can look in recent history, like, the Lions have done it. They were bad for a really long time. They got a couple first-round picks. They hit both of those. They hit a couple more picks over the course of a few years. You can change around your franchise very quickly if you make the correct draft selection. So if you're a Jets fan, that's what you have to look forward to. I know that kind of sucks because, we're not even at Thanksgiving yet. We got a lot of NFL season left, but it is what it is. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the fourth team. Another team who has kind of solidified, hey, we believe we can win a Super Bowl this year. The Seahawks traded for Rashid Shaheed today to complement JSN. What can you tell us about this, and what was the Seahawks plan today?
Well, I'll tell you this, Ty. Again, we've been saying for weeks on Sunday Countdown, on Get Up, on Pat McAfee, Rashid Shaheed was a player that the Saints were open to trading, that they would wind up in all possibilities moving on from by the trade deadline. And that's exactly what happened. They want to try to re-sign Chris Olave. Brandon Cooks is older, well-traveled, and respected, but nobody was going to give up any kind of premium compensation for Brandon Cooks. And it left Rashid Shaheed, who was on an expiring contract, as the odd man out. The belief was he was going to be traded. The surprise was that it was to the Seattle Seahawks. I did not think the Seattle Seahawks were going to be adding a wide receiver today to a stable of receivers that includes Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp and Torrey Horton and Jake Bobo and A.J. Barner and Elijah Arroyo at tight ends. So they had a surplus of weapons. And what they decided in a season where their team is incredibly explosive is to get more explosive with Rashid Shaheed. And just like the Colts are recognizing and seizing on an opportunity in a magical season by going to trade for Sauce Gardner, the Seattle Seahawks are doing the same thing by bolstering a position that I did not think that they would need. There were other teams that were interested and inquiring on Rashid Shaheed, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Buffalo Bills, the Denver Broncos, and yet somehow Shaheed winds up in Seattle, which was not what most people thought would be the case. Again, Shaheed was going to be traded, but nobody thought it would be to the Pacific Northwest, to a team that's been better than everybody thought. And oh, by the way, I know we talked a lot about Jaden Daniels and the way the Commanders handled him on Sunday night, and that was a point of conversation throughout the day, which, by the way, that seems like a long time ago now. But the fact of the matter is, the Seahawks didn't get the flowers they deserved for blowing out Washington in Washington, taking it to them, and Sam Darnold looking as good as Daniel Jones has looked. Sam Darnold and Daniel Jones have looked about as good as any quarterbacks in the league this year. And now Sam Darnold gets another new toy in Seattle as he's shining. I don't know, do we give Sam Darnold the comeback player of the year? Do we give him the offensive player of the year? Do we put him into the MVP conversation? Like, what are we doing with Sam Darnold other than giving him Rashid Shaheed? Something, right? Because he's been great.
Yeah, I think he's firmly played himself into the MVP conversation, especially, I mean, it seems like, he's throwing 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns every week. But I think that is the big thing, like you mentioned, is, I mean, he was 16-16 in the first half on Sunday night. Yeah, for however many are 2 touchdowns. And they just go belt to ass on, Washington. And you're thinking, I don't know, how can this team, they look like they are rolling on all cylinders. And then you add a guy like that who is a legitimate home run threat on every single play opposite Jackson Smith and Jigba. Now, I haven't been watching too many Saints games, so I don't know how he's getting covered this year. I assume he's getting doubled a lot. But guess what? You can't do that with JSN on the field. So, yeah, for a Seahawks team who obviously we know how good their defense is with Mike McDonald, but has looked unbelievably scary on offense, to add a playmaker of this caliber, a home run hitter of this type, like, boy, watch out for the Seahawks.
Before we move on to team and topic number 5 of trade deadline day, I just want to point out, Sam Darnold once was a New York Jet. If the New York Jets had kept Sam Darnold and traded away the 3rd overall pick and taken Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell and kept Sam Darnold as their quarterback and built around, would they have even been in the position they were today, trading away Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner for future first-round draft picks that gives them the capital they need to go out to try to get a quarterback like Sam Darnold is today for the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably just because Kyle Shanahan or Kevin O'Connell wasn't there with the Jets, but hey, you never know. Obviously,
Yep.
it took Sam Darnold a little bit to fully mature and get to the position where he's at, but like we mentioned, he's going to be a top 4, top 5 MVP candidate, by the end of next weekend, probably, if he isn't already. I haven't checked the betting lines for that, but let's move on to the 5th team of trade deadline day here, Shefty, the Jags. You would be able to tell us better, obviously. Was this surprising when they traded for Jakobi Meyers? I don't know if very many people connected them to needing a wide receiver. Obviously, Travis Hunter's going to be out indefinitely, and you mentioned, that Brian Thomas Jr. is a little banged up. Hopefully he can go on Sunday, but did this just turn into a necessity, and they're 5-3, and they kind of realize, hey, the playoffs are very much still on the table, so they had to go, or how did this come to be?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, Liam Cohen loves wide receivers. Like, he just loves wide receivers, and they've put a lot into that position. And I think it really stems back to last week when Travis Hunter gets hurt in practice. Now, I'm told his ACL is intact, but it's a significant knee injury. And to put him on IR at the very least, I have a feeling we're not going to see him for a while. I think there's a chance we're not going to see him again this season. He's still going through testing. If you're still going through testing 5 days after the injury occurred, that tells you that there's not clarity, that there's concern, that there's some issues, that it might not be as quick as people would like it to be. Travis Hunter also is not the kind of guy who's been injured very much in his career. So if he's injured, then clearly it's something. So my point is, Travis Hunter is going to be out for a while. And we'll hope that we see him again at some point this season, but I think it's up in the air right now. Brian Thomas suffered a low-grade high ankle sprain. He thinks he might be able to play, but they have 2 receivers who are banged up, one who's not going to be back anytime soon. So they recognize that they had an opportunity. Now, let's also keep in mind that going into Tuesday, the Jacksonville Jaguars had 13 picks in the 2026 NFL Draft. 13, despite the fact that they already traded their first-round draft pick to Cleveland to move up to take Travis Hunter. They had 13 picks. So to move a 4 and a 6 to the Raiders for Jakobi Meyers and still leave your team and franchise with 11 picks in the 2026 draft, 11 picks in 7 rounds, you're still set up well. And they're trying to make it to the playoffs this year. They're trying to turn around and remake their image in Jacksonville. They've been good this season. They won a very entertaining game on Sunday in Las Vegas against Jakobi Meyers' Raiders, who now goes from playing against the Jaguars to playing with the Jaguars in the span of a week. And now they've got an opportunity. I don't think that they wanted to forego that. And there was a lot of interest in Jakobi Meyers. A lot of teams really liked him. I go back over the last couple of years. The number of times that Jakobi Meyers' name came up in trade conversations was off the charts. So people really liked him. Jacksonville got him before the deadline for a 4 and a 6.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, there, he was connected with Pittsburgh a lot and some of these other teams who are, wide receiver needy. But good on the Jags because they are in a position right now. Obviously it feels like it's been quite a bit of time since they beat Kansas City on that Monday night, and it was kind of like the coming out party, and we were saying, hey, have the Jags arrived? Is this team really ready to go under Liam Cohen? And they haven't looked great. Obviously, there was the big time drubbing overseas. So it's one of those things where, hey, listen, Travis Hunter, I don't want to say they were relying on him a bunch on offense, but we kind of saw the explosiveness that he could bring. Brian Thomas Jr. banged up, and also he hasn't been the guy he was last year. So for them to get a guy like Jakobi Meyers to kind of just solidify what they're trying to do on offense, make things a little bit easier for Trevor Lawrence, I think it makes sense. They're 5-3. They're in this thing, and they are definitely contenders to get one of those final AFC playoff spots. All right, Shefty, let's move on to the 6th and final topic of this trade deadline 6-pack. Breaking news not too long ago. The Cardinals have officially announced they are going to stick with Jacoby Brissett over Kyler Murray. You mentioned how there was some sort of injury designation where sometimes it could take 4 to 8 weeks with what he's got. He's banged up. It was a little weird because before the Monday night game, they said that he wasn't out and he was maybe going to have a role. And then obviously the injury report comes out. He is out. So what can you tell us about that whole situation?
Well, first of all, it's been trending this way. I think when you talk to people in and around the league, they felt like watching the Cardinals offense, Jacoby Brissett operates it at a higher level. It's more efficient. Trey McBride caught more touchdown passes the last 3 weeks from Jacoby Brissett than he had the last couple of years from Kyler Murray. Marvin Harrison Jr. looks unlocked playing with Jacoby Brissett as opposed to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, the upside and the talent is huge, but it's not the efficient operation on offense that it has been with Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett's just a steady stock. He's been in the league for 10 years. He's never going to be flashy. He's never going to be great, but he's always going to be solid. And maybe he goes to Seattle this week and bombs out, flames out, doesn't play well, and they want to go back to Kyler Murray. But Kyler Murray's dealing with a foot injury that I was told today is a 4 to 8 week injury, up to 8 weeks. Now, we also have Jonathan Gannon coming out and saying that it's a situation where he's making the change partly because of the way Jacoby's played and partly due to injury. So in a way, he didn't say it's permanent, but everybody could see where this is going, and they're sticking with Jacoby Brissett short term. The real question now is long term. And here's what we have to remember. Kyler Murray is due over $38 million in guaranteed money after this season. The Cardinals general manager, Monty Ossenfort, the Cardinals head coach, Jonathan Gannon, did not draft Kyler Murray. He was drafted by the previous regime. Kyler Murray doesn't look overly enthralled about being in Arizona, so we can see both sides at some point sitting down after the season, and you can concoct in your mind a very simple scenario, a clear path to Kyler Murray being one of these quarterbacks who's traded during the offseason. Where is he traded to? Could it be the Raiders? Could it be the Browns? Could it be a team that doesn't get a quarterback? But clearly, I think the sense right now would be, with Kyler Murray not playing, with him resting his injured foot, with the offense operating well under Jacoby Brissett and the Cardinals sticking with him, I think we have a little bit of a quarterback issue here that's going to come to a head in the offseason one way or another in Arizona. But for the time being, it's Jacoby Brissett, and we'll see how the rest of it plays out.
Yeah, I think the writing's kind of on the wall for that one, because if you've watched the Cardinals play with Jacoby Brissett, it just does look different. Their offense is way more efficient. They're getting the ball in their playmakers' hands, and like you said, he's just even keel. And I mean, it goes one of two ways. Either, Jacoby Brissett keeps winning and kind of makes the decision just easier for them, or they don't win, and Kyler comes back in there, and then does the offense kind of just go back to the same stale thing it was when he was playing? I don't know. I mean, we talk about the money, and I think, now granted, I don't know if Michael Bidwell has the kind of money, the Penner family has with, their Walmart connections and all that kind of stuff. But after what we saw the Broncos eat getting rid of Russ Wilson, look at where they're at now. If you feel firmly about it that, hey, this guy is not going to be the guy that can kind of lead us to the promised land or lead us to a Super Bowl, then you're better off cutting bait early than just kind of spinning your tires and wasting time for another few years. So like you said, I think maybe a change of scenery would do him good. He's obviously one of the most electric quarterbacks in the NFL still when he is healthy, but it just hasn't looked right in Arizona for a little bit now. And it's kind of always been hey, if this team can just get hot and string together a couple wins, because they do have spurts over the last few years where they play competent football, they just can't put it together, and that's a tough division, and not really a division where you can, go 8-9 or 9-8 and think that you're going to win your division. It just, in the NFC West, unfortunately, it doesn't work out like that.
Ty, I know you have responsibilities elsewhere, but we're going to wrap up today with this little note. There were 8 trades on Tuesday, trade deadline day, tied for the second most on any deadline day going back to 1990, when there were 10 trades on November 1st, 2022. There were 18 trades from October 1st to trade deadline day this season, tied with 2022 and 2024 for the most in that time period in a season. It felt like there were more significant trades than ever before. It's why we waited to tape this podcast until after the trade deadline passed. I appreciate you waiting around. Thank you to you. Thank you to our great producer, Dan Stanzik. Thank you to all the people tuning into the Adam Schefter podcast. We'll be back in this spot on Thursday to begin to look ahead to the action in Week 10. Until then, have a great week, everybody. Be well and stay safe.